Hi everyone, welcome to this video. And in this lesson, I'm going to talk about how I paint characters. So let's start. So what I usually, of course, I start with a sketch like this. So let's take that one, place that here, and make it a bit bigger. And I think this one is good to start because this is quite a simple character. And let's make this gray and white now with Paint Bucket tool. It's in Photoshop, the shortcut is G. So normally I sketch on a white background, so I don't have to do this. But this can be done quite quickly. So here, let's do this. And then what I do then is now I have this, I put it on multiply so I can see right through it. Makes this white. So now I'm filling this with white. You can see you can look through it. So that's a handy trick if you made a sketch in your sketchbook and you scan that in and you want to color it in Photoshop or a different program. So what I do now is I make a new layer, Ctrl G, or I press this button. And with the selection tool, I first make the big shape. And I use the lasso tool and I press or I hold on the Alt button on Windows. And I make the selection of the fish. And sometimes that's a little bit different. Sometimes I'm just doing the big shapes, and sometimes I start with making the whole shape. So I'm now doing it a bit fast. Normally I would be a bit more precise to do this. So following the shape. So here and here. And filling this. And here. And closing it. So when you release it, it automatically closes the selection. So try that out, how that works if you haven't done it. So I fill it with an orange. So in the next video, I will talk a bit more about color theory. I wanted to focus here on coloring characters. So I'm using this orange colors, and oftentimes I keep the saturation quite high and also the brightness quite high. So now we have this, and I'm using these UE saturation and blackness colors or color settings. So here you can choose different sliders, but I'm using those HSB sliders to color it. So now I made a selection, and then I have that layer selected and press Ctrl G to make a folder. Let's call this fish. And now we can press Ctrl and select that layer or the thumbnail on that thing. And then you have the selection of the fish. Select the folder and press this. This is the mask button. So if we press this, you get this mask on the folder. So create a folder and then make a selection, or press Ctrl and select the thumbnail. Then you get the selection of that layer, of what's on that layer. And then select this folder and press this to get this mask here. So now we can start blocking in all the different layers, like the eye. So here, the eye, and sometimes I do both eyes on one layer, or sometimes on separate. It doesn't really matter that it's having them both on one layer makes it a bit easier and you have fewer layers. But on the other side, let's delete this brush. it, yeah. Okay, let's also, so I made these new brushes for an Instagram video. So here, this sketch brush or this, let's take this ink brush. So now we have these eyes. Okay, that's fine. And is there something more? Maybe we can make the pupils already. Let's take the orange, but let's make it a bit darker. And now I make it a bit darker so I know how to do it. So in the final drawing, the final painting, you can see I a bit changed the irises and pupils because I think that worked better. So let's do something like this here. And here. And let's add the pupils here and there. Or the pupils in that, it's a hole in the iris. So let's draw it like this. We can also make those fins like here. It is a bit darker, maybe. This one as well. Let's make a new layer for the tail. So here, and you can see I'm making sure this part is correct. So like this here, but this you can make this big selection and fill it because you don't see it because of the mask. Do we have everything? Here you can see I also made the eyebrows. So I can also add those. Those need to be behind the eyeballs. So you have these layers and these layer order. So something that's under this. So let me show that. So here, we have this here. Fill this with the color, and you can also see me using the color picker. So that is when you have a brush over the paint bucket tool, you can press Alt and you get this eyedropper. So here you can see those eyebrows. You can also put it on top of this layer and then it's in front of it, and here it's behind it. So now we have this, and now we can start with the fun part and paint the thing. So I don't know if you've seen the video about me painting the balls, and if you haven't and you don't have that much experience with painting, I would recommend you to watch it, because it's really the basic knowledge you need to know. So what I use is oftentimes I press V and then you get this selection tool, and then I press Control and click on the layer I want to select. But because the sketch is in front of it, I select this sketch the whole time. So having this sketch layer selected and I press this lock button, now I can go through it with my selection. So now if you see my layers, you see I'm flipping through all these layers here. So let's start with the big shape. And that's the thing I always think in. I think in big shapes first and then smaller shapes later. So I made here these, I have here this brush panel, and here I select this paint brush, and I made these brushes myself. So I had this ink brush, and what I do is I make this, I put the shape dynamic off, so it's one straight line, and I put the hardness on 0, But I also want to control it with my pen, that if I press softly, so when I now draw a line, so let's do it here. When I now draw a line, you get to see it's there's no pressure sensitivity on the pen. But if I put it on transfer, you can get it from soft to hard, from transparent to non-transparent. So you want to have that for painting. So put the transfer on pen pressure, and if you make this brush settings, you can click this icon to create your own brush. So let's call this Patreon brush. And now you have this brush here. And that's how I work. So I can switch between all these brushes. But let's delete it because I already made a brush like that. Here, this paint brush. And let's start selecting the layer we want to adjust. So control click on the layer you want to work on. So what I do, this is the base color, and the light is coming from the left top corner. So I take the base color and I make that a bit darker, and I put the saturation a bit up. And I want, there's a cool, warm color, and I think I want a bit of a cooler shadow color. In my next video, I will talk a bit more about making those colors cooler. So this is a bit too purplish. Let's make this a bit darker, or let's look at the color. And I actually like this already more. What happens if you make this? I actually already like this more than there, because you have this warm, it gets warmer here, but maybe make it a bit darker, a bit more saturation. I'm just trying to find a shadow color I actually like. So now we have this, and also add teal. So maybe I want to have the teal the same color, orange. The shadow. Let's fill in the shadow here. So sometimes I put this sketch layer off, because in the end you don't want to see those sketch layers. And I get that question on how to turn off your sketch layer. So, and to do that is just to put it off sometimes and then later put it on again. Select this top fin, and oh no, it's not really, oh yeah, it is necessary because this is on the top. I press this icon because when I paint now, it's go all over it. But when I press this, I can paint within this shape. So, and when your layers don't look like this, you can go to here, and then you can select panel options. So in your layer window, panel options, you can tell the thumbnail size. I have these small thumbnails because I want to see as many layers as I can. But here you can select your thumbnail contents, the layer bounds or the entire document. When you have your entire document and you have here this pixel here, so let me show it. If I put the entire document on, press OK, you can see, you don't really can see clearly what's in that layer. You just see the whole document. But when you go to panel options again and do the layer bounds, you see the what's in the layer till the layer bounds. And if you don't get it, just try it out what I showed. So go to layer options and then to panel options to check that out. So here now we have these fins. And also some people ask me, should I use Procreate or not? And or would you like to do some Procreate tutorials? And I think that the main things you can do in Photoshop, you can also do on Procreate. What I'm doing here, you can also do in Procreate, only the things have different name. And in a later lesson, I will also do some Procreate videos. So more about it soon. So shade those things. And now we're getting there more and more. So now we can shade this eyeball. So this eyeball is also round. So there's also some shadow. Oh, you can see I forgot to press this icon. So, and also by seeing the layer bounds, you can also see if there's maybe some lost pixels. So here you can see it, that the layer bounds changed. So I also use to check that if there's not any garbage on those layers. The irises. So first I start with doing the really global lightning on the eyes. So here. So what I now do is with the irises, the top is darker than the bottom, and that's because your lenses have fluid in them, so the light passes through it, and then the bottom lights up. So here this piece is lighter. So it's opposite of the color of where the light is coming from. So here. And that's because here, if we this brush, so if we have the eyeball and you have your lens here, here is your iris, and your lens is filled with fluid, some kind of water. So the light hits here and it goes through the lens on your iris. So this part is light up, this light, and this part is darker. So that's why irises look like that. So now you have this, and you could actually also draw in the mouth if you want to with an hard brush. So, and a lot of beginners ask me also, what kind of brushes do you use? And oftentimes I just use these basic brushes I make myself. And sometimes you want some texture, and maybe if you're drawing a bit more realistic, you also want to have more textures, and then that's totally fine. So one thing you can do is in Photoshop there are a lot of free brushes, so you don't have to buy them. Actually, you can go to the brushes and you can press this button with get more brushes, and there are a lot of good free brushes in Adobe Photoshop now. So now we've made this, and now we can start painting in some more light. So let's take the paintbrush again and add that reflective light. Where's this? Oh, I made a mistake here. Let's erase this. Yeah, I didn't press that button where you can paint in the shape. So I need to fix that a bit. Stupid that I didn't notice that. So here, now it's more or less fixed. So like this. So if you remember the ball example I did in the first painting video, I showed this reflective light here. So let's add that here. And let's also add some, oh, that's all fine. I think that's okay. Yeah, let's maybe add some cast shadow. So these are all things I explained in that ball painting video. So here I'm adding some cast shadow like this here. And what's important is that you think of how does the shadow go on top of the shape. So like this, it's a bit round, right? So maybe here, oh, you can also make this brush soft, the eraser. So here. Maybe what's close to the object there, where's the cast shadow is coming from, is a bit sharper. So probably have something like this. Also add some shadow here. And there's also some cast shadow coming from the eyeballs, like here. Maybe from this eyebrow, something like that. Maybe there's also a bit of an highlight on top of that fish here. Now we have this part, and this is not completely flat, it's almost, but there's maybe this little edge. So painting this light of this little edge. And what I do is I take this base color and just make it a bit lighter and also a bit desaturated. And also do that with the tail. So adding these edges will make it look more 3D. So here, and also here. Maybe you can also give this lip of this fish this thickness here. And make this a bit darker so there's some depth. And again here, if you put some highlights here on the top of the lip, it looks like that. So on this eyeball should also be some reflective light. So put on this button again, don't forget it. And making some reflective light here. Maybe add some more here. Also on this side. And maybe add some highlights here and here. And add another extra here. So these eyeballs are glassy, so you have these hard highlights. And the harder or the smoother a surface is, the harder the highlights get. Think of an, for example, a bowling ball. So here now we have this. And what I also start doing now in this stage is I make a new layer, and I make the brush with shape dynamics. And if it doesn't happen here, put the control on pen pressure, and then you get this brush with small points, thick middle, and small point on the end. So if you put this above the mask, you can see it. Here you can see this brush. And it's a bit of jittering, so I put on the smoothing so you get these more smoother lines. Let's delete this. Put it back in the folder. And draw in these edges here. So, and more or less this is the occlusion shadow. So maybe here. So, and it's basically the same again as painting with this ball. These parts are the occlusion shadows. So here, maybe also add this here. So I'm now actually drawing again on it. And later I will start painting again on top of it to make sure it doesn't look like sketched. So here, adding these lines for the fins, what you're seeing there. You can also play around a bit with the thickness. So like here, maybe you can color pipette it and then you can make it again and maybe brush it again. So this is basically how I draw these parts. It's not rocket science. It's often a lot. Painting is just often a lot of time until it's right, and that's also the thing that you need to understand, that you need to develop your style and the way you like to work, and it takes time. So maybe that way of working is also different than mine. And that's totally fine. And maybe it's even more efficient and it works better. But I think you really need to try to find it out yourself. So add a new layer. And what I also do is sometimes I take this hard brush and put the shape dynamics off. Then I start painting in these shapes here. So just like this. Then I take a soft eraser, make that a bit bigger, and maybe erase it. This part here. So we get this part under the eye. So here you can see it. So you can add these extra shadows here and there. So like this. Erase it here and here. If you make this soft brush smaller, you get a harder edge. If you make it bigger, it's a softer edge. So maybe also add some extra shadow here. Make this a bit bigger. Soft here. I like that it's a bit of a hard edge here. So I softly erased here. And you want to have a mix of hard edges and soft edges. And maybe select this fin, select this part, and maybe add a layer on top of it. Make this dark. So this edge is a bit too hard. So maybe make something like this. So it's not too soft edge. And here a really big one. And I erase it softly. So you get this effect. And maybe you want to put this layer on multiply, for example. So you get this effect. So you can play around with these layer effects on top of it. So now I have this, and I think the iris still looks a bit flat. So I take this brush and draw in this edge around the eye. So again, normally I will take a bit more time of it to make it sharper, stuff like this. But the point I want to make here is that I take the time and add some layers on top of it. Some more details, maybe. And the iris is kind of a muscle. You have all these muscle fibers. So you want to paint in this a bit here and there. Maybe make this here. So like this. You can also do that for the other eye, of course. Something like that. Maybe add another line here. And again, take this brush. Sometimes I like this brush more than soft brush because you don't want those soft edges everywhere. We add this part here. So, and a really good exercise is, for example, to take an apple and put it on your table and start painting that apple. So you start seeing it in real life, those things. So like this, and maybe put a bit of darkness behind here. Oh, take the soft brush here. Let's see, it's behind this eyebrow, so maybe put it on top. And if there's some small mistakes, that doesn't really matter. You can later paint on top of that. So maybe add some extra glow on the eye. So I take this soft brush, but I don't make it too big. So there's this sort of hard edge. Let's make it really wide. So I paint this really big highlight and go along with the shape of the eyeball. Then with the soft eraser, what you can also do is select that layer, press the mask button, and then you pick a black brush, soft brush, and then you start erasing the parts you don't want to. And nice thing about this is that if you think you made a mistake, you can take the white brush and bring it all back, because that information is still on that layer. So here and there. Maybe also add some white under it here. Take the black brush again to erase it. Bits here. This is how I paint. And remember, it's important to zoom in, zoom out a lot of times. If you stay too zoomed in too long, yeah, you can maybe make some make details, and then you zoom out, and then you see that doesn't really work that well if you're zoomed out again. So here, keep adding some highlights. Now adding some extra yellow to it's sort of a rim light here at these edges. Some extra lighting from the sunlight is coming through the water. Yeah, let's add some textures to this, some spots. Take a brush and I take that color of the fish. Doesn't really matter that much this time. And I start drawing in these dots. Can be gray, so something like this. Just make some nice shapes and let them go along with the shape of the fish. So something like this here and there. Here and there. So something like this. And then put it on multiply. So like this. And then take the eraser and erase the bit where you think it's a bit too much. So here. And maybe if you want, you can with press then Ctrl U, and then you get the UE saturation box, and you can change the colors a bit. Maybe add a bit more saturation. Yeah, I think it's nice if it's a bit warmer. And press OK. So now we have this, and we could add a new layer and take a soft brush and put that layer on overlay, for example, and take a color, maybe is white working, and then you can create some extra lightning. It gives this really extra color like this here. Maybe some light from under beneath, something like this. And maybe you can make a new layer, put that on multiply. And oftentimes for multiply, I take a purple color and put the saturation a bit low and the blackness as well. And I paint on top of it. And then it gets a bit more depth. And what you can actually do is to check if you you like the values, and the values is that you look at the picture without color, so in black and white. Then you can check out the value. So fill a whole new layer that's on top with black or white, and put this layer on color. And then you can check if you like the depth. Does it look 3D? You can turn it off to see the colors and so on. So if you put it on, then you can see this one has a lot of contrast in it. Then you can decide yourself if you like that more or less, but then it gives you this extra information without looking at colors. So this is really a good check to do. So I would advise you to sometimes make your painting in black and white, and to check if the values are correct. So that I wanted to show with the goldfish. I know, and I made this month more painting tutorials, like for example with the snail, and it's not that much really. I made the snail the same way as I made that that fish. So what you could do is with the shadow. Oh, what is happening? So what you can do is with shadow is if you have the shadow of the snail, I often start with an hard shape, and then I go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. So, and then I make this blurry. So you get this blurry shadow. And then I make these edges softer with the soft brush. So you get this effect. So maybe zoom it out. So, and that's also a trick I often use with, making that. So I think this is also interesting. So let me quickly draw a face. So if we have this character, this nose and these eyes, this ear and this neck, so like this. So we have your sketch here. So what I sometimes do is then I start with the values, and I do that because then you can start focusing on if the values are correct and so on. So sometimes that makes it really more easy to judge if you're doing it. Okay, so let's start filling this shape with gray. So then you have the background color and the color of the head. And is there enough contrast? Can you read it? Good. And yeah, I think that works. So just like the goldfish, put it in a folder with a mask. And now we can start adding the shadow. So you can also start with making the shadow hard. So the light is coming from the top right. So here painting the cheek, the side of the head, so something like this. So let's also painting the ear. This side is light up. And if you have difficulty understanding the side and the planes of the head, try to learn a bit more about drawing in 3D, and so that will really help you with painting as well. You make this cast shadow of the neck, of the jaw on the neck. So like this. So how this actually works is that lightning is that if you have this ball here, and let's fill this ball, this color, and the light is here coming from this point, then this will be shadow. So I'm doing that here as well. Try to think of where that shadow is on the nose, the side, and under the eyes, this here. Maybe there's some occlusion shadow between the eyebrows, maybe some between the lip, and maybe a bit under here, so something like this. And, if there's hair, there's also this edge here, the side of the hair. Maybe that looks a bit more like this here. Something like this. And then you can create another layer. Maybe it's good to start with 3 types of shades. So here, maybe inside the ear, this darker shadow. And maybe there's also a bit of the darkness here. Maybe behind the ear, shadow behind there. Maybe there's a bit of that here. Maybe if you see a nostril, it would also be dark there. Let's add some more shadow, some cast shadow of that nose there. So, and then you can see if you like that or not. Let's merge this. So now you can start making this a bit softer. So sometimes I just paint on one layer, and with the soft brush I start to make those edges softer. Some edges you want to be hard, like here this face has a lot of hard corners. So I want to keep that. But I don't want to let it look too cel shaded. Here, give this it's a bit of a softer shadow. Maybe make this under the lip, it's a bit hard, and there it needs to be a bit softer. Bottom. So here. Like this, maybe make this a bit softer. Like this. Softer. And then like this here. That's basically it. And maybe you start adding some lighter points, top of the eyebrows, top of the head. So here, and this brush is pressure sensitive, so you can do with these simple brushes, you can do a lot. These edges here, some lips, some eyeballs. This here. So maybe add this here and here. And maybe there's some reflective light from the back. So here and here. Now it's starting to look more 3D as we go. And now you can really focus on getting that 3D feeling right now and not worry about the colors. So if people ask me why I start with value, it's mainly because then I can focus more on getting this part right. So now we have made the global lighting, and we can take a harder brush again, not really super hard, it's harder, and you can paint in the, maybe you want to do the different with a lesser tool. And paint in the hair value. Like this. So, and fill this a bit. Decide how dark you want it to be. You can also press Ctrl U and play around with the value of that layer. So something like this here. Maybe painting those eyes here. Like this. And making those pupils here darker. Adding some highlights here and there. And adding some more highlights here, there on top of that nose. So here's a bit harder. So now this is really not a great drawing, but if you have a nice drawing, this would work way better. Here, this here. So, but basically you can see here, I'm just keep adding all those These points. Maybe you can turn off this line art. Then you see it looks really crude. So maybe put it lighter. And then you can start adding the shadows that you want, like this here. Erase it a bit here. So here, maybe make this here. So these are these occlusion shadows. And you actually have this in real life. Look at when you're closing your fingers together, then you get this dark line. So we have these in life as well. And again, painting is just making a lot of these things. And sometimes you have this light at the edges. We call that a rim light. So sometimes I start painting on top of the mask if I think I need to add some extra volume. Or sometimes I also paint on top of the sketch lines, like this here. So painting here is just basically the same as with the fish or with the ball from the first drawing video. And it's just basically those same steps as I do here. So when I have this, something like this here, so for the hair as well, and in later video I will tell more about painting hair. So I'm adding all these lines here. So that's basically, and I do this basically with this brush. So when I edit all these details, and I have a drawing like this, let's take the selection of this one, then I start adding color. And I'm not always working like this, but sometimes I do, and in this case I did. So here now we have this thing. So here I have this white background here, put this layer here. So what I sometimes do is then I make a new folder, and sometimes you have that. So normally I would have the selection or the mask from this here. So be something like this. So what I do then is make a new folder with a mask, and I put this, and I fill this layer, so something like this, with a color for the skin. So it's looking for a main color, so something like this. And then I put it, this layer on color, and you get this. And it's still not really working good, so maybe I'm trying to find some more of the color I like with the hue saturation. So maybe something like this. And then maybe add some more color layers, maybe for the hair. So normally you would have these layers. And then maybe make this color. And if you then don't get the colors you really want, it doesn't really matter too much at this stage, because you want just the basic ideas of the color, right? And you want to set up your layers, making these eyes, maybe eyeballs, maybe a bit more yellowish. Here, this in, put this on color, give him maybe blue eyes. something like this, color, and so on. So now we have this, and now you can also start painting a bit on top of those layers with more the colors you want. So here, take this, and maybe try to find the colors you want to use. So here I use these colors. So I'm just adding and erasing a bit. And that is the downside of working this way, is when you, is how I work, because I don't really like the colors I get immediately, so I start painting on top of it. And that is a process that can take a lot of time. But I think this is a great way to start learning how to work with values. But now I'm just starting to paint on top of it, and I'm using these values as some kind of reference, and I'm playing around with maybe making this a bit darker and a bit lighter. Maybe make it a bit more redder. So in skin, it's always a bit tricky to get the right color. So here I use this. Let's put some of those colors on top of it that I used here. So here I use this really warm colors in the cheeks, like here. And for the chin, I use these cooler colors. So what I did, I used these warm, really saturated colors. And it's actually really, it took me quite some time to get there and to find these colors that I wanted with this character. Here, so sometimes I do is I'm just going to start to experiment a bit on how I want to let it look. And sometimes I don't like it, but then you can just turn it off and see the effect. So like this and here. So here. So maybe this is too dark. Let's make it a bit lighter, but make it more saturation. Keep adding this here. So what can help you with this is first work really roughly, and then maybe if you have something like the colors you want to use, you can put it in. You can make a copy of that, place it besides, and then maybe you can put it off again. Make a new layer, and then you can use that rough sketch to painting, but then really neatly. So here you made a really quickly rough version of it, and now you start to work on it more orderly. So it can be quite challenging to work first with the value drawing and then add layers on top of it, and it can be a lot of work, but having the values first can really help you with getting the 3D effect first. And it's a longer route, and oftentimes I work the way I work with the goldfish. So start with the colors right, but it can be a bit dangerous that it doesn't look 3D more. And starting with your values is can help you get the 3D effect more. So if you're starting out with painting, I would advise you to really start making at least a couple of value drawings, value only drawings, and then later add the colors, because that's really important to get these values right first. So check it if it's not flat, and if it works. So that's what I wanted to show in this video. And in the next video, I will tell more about painting textures and hair and stuff like that. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next painting video. Thanks everyone. Cheers.